Hey, welcome back, sports fan, to Breakdown SEC versus the Big Ten. Today is November 22nd, 2021. It's Monday. A lot of things happened, JJ, in the SEC and the Big Ten over the weekend and in college football in general. So many things to talk about. We could talk about a new coaching vacancy in the SEC. In addition to LSU, there's Florida. We could talk about this upcoming game between Michigan State and Penn State. We could talk about the Pac 12 uh, being missing the college football party for the fifth straight year. We can talk about Michigan's basketball team losing last night to Arizona. But what we're going to talk about the Michigan first. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but the first thing we're going to talk about is the Michigan State Ohio State game that was played last week. Ohio State won that game 56-7. I'm here with my favorite sports analyst, ever smooth JJ. JJ, give me your take. Tell me what was there anything in the Michigan State Ohio State game that surprised you?
Um, I think the most surprising element of the Michigan State Ohio State game was how quickly it was over. Um, by halftime, it was 49-0. Uh, Ohio State dominated from beginning to end of that game, and it was just interesting to see a team so as resilient as Michigan State demoralized so quickly. I'd say.
Okay, well, JJ, in that game, Ohio State in its opening drive went 86 yards for a score. In its second drive, it went 88 yards for a score. In its third drive, it went 71 yards for a score. All of this happening without with only facing one third down doing those things. The Buckeyes turned seven drives into seven touchdowns in the first half, averaging more than 10 yards per play. But the second half, 7-7 tie. So, were you impressed by the defense of the Michigan State's uh, friendly sky pass defense in the second half, only
Abs-
giving up 7 points?
Absolutely not. Ohio State was on autopilot by then, and I think we both know that.
Okay.
Michigan State's defense actually has a really good red zone scoring defense, but unfortunately for them, Ohio State didn't need to enter the red zone to score. Their first three trips for touchdowns, they didn't enter the red zone in any of them. It was
Okay.
21-0 before. And then once Michigan State fumbled on that next possession, that's when the game ended
Okay,
to me.
JJ. Why was there no fight in the Spartans in that game?
I think MSU wasn't prepared for how outmatched that they would be. I don't think that they hadn't played it in a game where they were thoroughly dominated like that. They had lost to Purdue, but most people consider Purdue to be an inferior team to Michigan State. It was just a bad day in West Lafayette. Those
Okay.
things can happen. They were utterly dominated against Ohio State, and I think that a little bit of that was shock. What do you think?
They were. Let me ask you this question: Did the news about the contract negotiation have anything to do with the preparation?
It might have, but I think the injuries and the talent um, gap might have had more to do. I think there was a lot of distractions regarding Mel Tucker and his contract status, and in some ways, I would say that the distraction of Mel Tucker potentially leaving for LSU, was ended.
Okay.
But the details of his contract was certainly much talked about as well. So that could have been a factor, but
Okay. Enough about the Michigan State Ohio State game. Unless there's something else you want to add.
no, I mean, what is to say that hasn't been said? Like,
Yeah, yeah. JJ, I want you to remind me never ever again to make a prediction on Michigan State or Arkansas because typically those predictions are not done very wisely. So if I ever even hint at something like that, I want you to give me a little nudge or something.
I've definitely fallen victim to thinking with my heart instead of my head as well, but yeah.
Okay, let's go to the SEC for a quick minute. The Arkansas Alabama game. Alabama won that game 42-35.
Yeah.
Was there anything in that game that surprised you?
I guess the resiliency of Arkansas. I would say if there was one play that surprised me the most, it would obviously be Arkansas's fake field goal. I think it surprised
For the touchdown.
Nick Saban in Alabama as well.
Yeah.
That was an amazing moment to cut the lead to 7 in the third. Or was that the fourth quarter?
I don't remember.
But either way, late in the game, they were able to cut it to 7, and it was that was incredibly exciting. Just threw him a little behind him,
Yeah.
but Kern still was able to pull it in.
And as slow as he was, he still.
Yeah.
Okay. But JJ, the SEC is pretty much set now. It's going to be Alabama and Georgia. So we won't spend a lot of time talking about the Iron Bowl. We won't spend any time talking about it, really.
Alabama's clinched the West regardless.
That's right. It's all set. It's Alabama and Georgia. But I want to ask you a question between Alabama, Ohio State.
Okay.
C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young? Which would you want to be your quarterback? C.J. Stroud with Ohio State and Bryce Young with Alabama.
The number one quarterback in the class coming out of high school was Bryce Young, and C.J. Stroud was either number 2 or number 3. The guy from Clemson was in between them.
Okay.
You know, it depends on what you like. Neither one is a dynamic runner. But I think Bryce Young offers a little bit more in that category than C.J. Stroud does. They're both really great passers. I mean, I don't know. Do you go with Bryce Young, who had 560 yards and 5 touchdowns, or do you go with C.J. Stroud, who had 440 yards and 6 touchdowns? I mean, I don't know. I think because Ohio State's receiving core is so dynamic, and they remind me of Alabama's from 2 years ago, when they had Judy and Ruggs and Devontae Smith and Waddle and all those guys. I'm gonna go with Young. I'm gonna say Stroud at Ohio State has a better receiving core to work with, so I will give the edge to Young.
Well, I would say this: you couldn't go wrong with either one of those quarterbacks. That's for sure.
They're gonna finish first and second for the Heisman voting in New York.
Well, not this year. Oh,
yeah,
first and second.
They're gonna finish first and second. After Kenneth Walker III, only was able to propel Michigan State to 7 points in the second half. I don't.
Did he injure? Did he hurt his chances of going to New York?
Kenneth Walker III?
Yes.
I think he'll still get invited.
Okay.
He's just been too consistent and too dynamic in every other game that he's played in.
Okay.
But I think it's between Stroud and Young for who's actually going to take home the trophy.
Okay. It's be interesting to see how the voting goes. Now, JJ, let's move on to the game that everyone in the Big Ten is talking about. The war between Michigan and Ohio State. What does the city of Toledo have to do with the war between Michigan and Ohio State and Ohio?
It's the land that Michigan and Ohio fought over, and Michigan was granted the Upper Peninsula.
That's right. They both claim ownership of Toledo. This goes back into the 1800s, and the president gave Michigan the UP, the Upper Peninsula, and he gave Ohio Toledo. Okay, JJ, this game, Michigan and Michigan State. Who won last year?
Who won 17 of the last 18 years? It was that team in Columbus with the scarlet and gray.
The two teams did not play last year.
Yeah, I forgot. No one won last year because Michigan wisely decided to not let that game be played.
Okay. Regarding that game, JJ, what's the most famous quote from that game? And I'll give you a hint. It happened in 1968. It was a year that Ohio State won 50-14, and after the final touchdown was scored in that game, Woody Hayes decided to go for two, and the
Because he
question was
couldn't go
and
for
the
three.
question was asked why, and he said his answer
Because he couldn't go for three.
because he couldn't go for three. Let me ask you this question: did Ohio State make that 2 point conversion?
I don't know. I was negative 20 years old at the time.
They did not. They did not.
Oh,
Okay, we're gonna start discussing this year's game. I want to go back to one more game, Michigan State and Ohio State. If you can recall the game in 2006, both
oh
teams.
yeah, one versus two.
That's right. Both teams were undefeated, one versus two. Ohio State won that game 42-39. It came very, very close to setting up those teams to play again in the national championship, but Florida edged Michigan out. So Florida was in that game rather than Michigan. But let's get to this game. This game is going to be Saturday. Which team is feeling the most pressure to win this game?
I would say the team that has lost 17 of the last 18 or whatever the record.
Okay.
I would say the team with the on the incredible losing streak.
So you think they're feeling a significant amount of pressure or a little? Because Ohio State, they know, they want to get to the playoffs. And if they lose this game, it's virtually no way they can get there. So there's not pressure for them to win this game?
There are pressure from both bases for different reasons,
Okay.
but the pressure is clearly more on Michigan than it is Ohio State because Michigan has an opportunity to make it to the playoff as well,
Okay.
and Michigan has lost the game so often. Neither one of these teams is in the top two, or neither one of these teams is projected to win the title.
Projections don't mean that much to me. Just getting there is the key. Because once you get there, you can do it. But I understand the projection.
Well, I think Ohio State will win the national
Okay.
championship.
And yeah, who's the two teams that are projected ahead of Ohio State?
Georgia and Alabama.
Really? Okay. So JJ says that Michigan is feeling the pressure more than Ohio State. JJ, people who have watched Ohio State play the prior 2 weeks against Purdue and against Michigan State probably believe that Ohio State is invincible. What say you?
I say Ohio State would lose by 10 to 20 points to last year's Alabama team, and they'd lose by even more to the prior year's LSU team. I don't think any of the teams in college football this year are invincible. Having said that, I do think Ohio State is one of the two best teams in college football. I think they're the yin to Georgia's yang as it pertains to the offense. I think they bring explosive, dynamic playmaking to the offensive side of the ball, and they have unmatched firepower on that side of the ball. And whereas Georgia does it via defense, I think.
Defense versus offense, man, oh man, it might come down to that, but there's a lot of football before we get to that. That's for sure. So Ohio State is not invincible. How does this Ohio State Buckeye team compare to previous Ohio State teams?
It very much reminds me of the Dwayne Haskins year, where they had three dynamic receivers: Paris Campbell, KJ Hill, and Terry McLaurin. And I think Dwayne Haskins threw for, if not 5,000, it was about at least 4,800 yards, and he had an insane touchdown to interception ratio and finished in the top 4 for Heisman and got an invite to New York. I would say that this team reminds me of that team. CJ Stroud also doesn't run. Dwayne Haskins wasn't a running threat, and CJ Stroud, I think, has rushed for a total of 25 yards on the entire season. So he's not a running threat, but he can just pick you apart from the pocket, and he's just gotten better and better ever since the Oregon game, second game of the year after they beat Minnesota. They started off to a slow start again in the Minnesota game.
Yes, they did.
And then they lost to Oregon the next game.
Yeah.
But ever since then, you can just see the development in the offense, like the pre-snap movements and like the post-snap adjustments that are being made. Like his development is clear and evident, and you can see the trajectory go up. So I would equate C.J. Stroud to Dwayne Haskins, um, and I might give the edge to Stroud in that respect.
Okay. We're going to talk more about this game in a few minutes, but before we talk more about that, I want to ask you from a college football and playoff perspective, uh, which game is bigger this week? This coming, is it going to be the Michigan Ohio State game, or is it the Oklahoma State game? We got all of these schools are 10-1, all four of them, and they're hooking up against each other, which is the bigger game.
Well, the highest ranked team of this quartet is Ohio State, and the second highest ranked team of this quartet is Michigan. So I'm gonna go with the Ohio State Michigan game being a little bit
Okay.
bigger.
How is it's pretty likely that one of the Ohio State or the Michigan game has a really great chance of making it to the playoff. What about Oklahoma State, the winner of that game?
Whoever wins that game has to play either Oklahoma or Oklahoma State or Baylor again in the championship. Those are the three teams that are still eligible.
Yeah, yeah.
Um. Yeah, what do you think?
Well, I actually think Oklahoma State's going to win. I was about to ask you who you think is going to win. Who would you pick to win the game between Oklahoma State?
Wow. I would say Oklahoma State has the most impressive unit of between the two teams. Their defense is better than either Oklahoma's offense or Oklahoma's defense. So I would say this will be the third time in Mike Gundy's tenure that Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma.
So he's beaten them twice in how many years? Roughly, an estimate.
15, 16,
Okay.
17 years.
So it's not that good.
No, I mean he
Okay.
doesn't beat Oklahoma.
Okay. Well, I'm picking him to win this year. Okay, JJ. Now back to a little bit more in-depth analysis of the Michigan Ohio State game. Do you expect this game to live up to the hype? You said it's the bigger of the matchup. Will it live up? Do you expect it to live up to the hype?
No, I fully expect Michigan to get blown out. OSU is firing on all cylinders, and they're scoring 10 points more a game than Michigan. They're passing for 100 yards more per game than Michigan. I think Michigan has a better defense than Ohio State, but I think Ohio State's defense is closer to being as good as Michigan's defense than Michigan's offense is close to being in anywhere near the same vicinity as Ohio State's offense. So
What's the spread in this game?
it opened at 7.5 or 8. I can't remember. Ohio State was only favored by like 7.5, I believe, which
Okay.
I think is free money. I would expect Ohio State to win by a lot.
I looked at the spread today. It was an 8 point. I didn't see the open. I didn't look very much. 8 point spread. Talk to me about Michigan's defense on the edge. Hutchinson and
Yeah, Aiden Hutchinson's going to be a top 5 draft pick. Should be a Heisman candidate. I mean, he's one of the best players in the country for sure. He can wreck a game. He can change the outcome of a game. He can do. I mean, I know Thibodeau didn't play in the Ohio State game, but he can. I mean, he's someone you have to account for and game plan for because he can completely wreck whatever plans you had. And I think if Michigan hopes to keep it close or upset Ohio State, he's going to have to get some 3-and-outs, get double teams, maybe get a turnover or something like that. I mean, you're going to have to steal some possessions. You're going to have to figure things out.
This is my take on the game, and you really surprised me with your take. I think Michigan's defense is going to keep C.J. Stroud kind of uncomfortable during the game. I don't think he's going to be able to sit back and just pick apart with his dynamic receivers, pick apart their defense. Additionally, I'm not convinced that Ohio State has had to endure an atmosphere that they will have to endure uh, in Ann Arbor. They played Penn State in Columbus. They played Michigan State in Columbus. They played Oregon in Columbus. Uh, their best road win, probably Purdue. Purdue was a road win, right? I think it was a road win.
I believe so.
But Purdue typically doesn't have uh, a loud stadium. I'm picking Michigan to win this game based on defense. Uh,
Who'd you pick in the Ohio State's last game?
Remember, I told you that I couldn't pick between Michigan and Arkansas, so that doesn't count.
Michigan State and Arkansas.
I'm sorry, okay. Michigan State and Arkansas. Any predictions on that is irrelevant. But now I'm picking, and I'm not a. I graduated from Michigan State. I'm not a Michigan fan, but I do see Michigan being there primarily on offense. You know, I looked at the over and under. I saw it. I can't remember what it was, but I said to myself, take the under, because the over was way too high. And, you know, I'm expecting Jim Harbaugh to produce this year. I think last year, someone told me, and I don't know if it's true, and I doubt that it's true, but you know, someone said that Ohio State, Ryan Day said he could hang up 100 on Michigan. I think Michigan has been planning for this Ohio State game since day one, and oftentimes the underdog has come into this game and fought and won. I don't know. I just wonder if the point spread is going to stay at 8 or in that neighborhood, because people are getting wooed by Ohio State's offense. Ohio State was going against the defense that was known for their friendly fly zones, and that's what Ohio State specialized in. What will Ohio State, JD? Will Ohio State establish a running game against the Wolverines?
Well, they have to.
Why do you say that?
I think that they will. I believe in Travion Henderson, but I don't know if they will have to. I think that they're between Wilson, Olave, and Smith. I don't know if they will have. I mean, they can even.
Okay, just remember that they will not be playing Michigan State's Friendly Skies this week. And so you're expecting them to have the similar result against Michigan that they had against Michigan State?
No, Michigan should be Michigan's defense should be much better than Michigan State's. But even so, Ohio State has the best receiving core in the country.
Okay.
So that is something that Michigan can only account for so often.
Okay. Those same guys played against Oregon, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and their quarterback has more than one start under his belt now. So.
Okay. I'm getting excited about the game, and I wasn't even that excited now.
Well, I mean, if you watch the Michigan State game, one of the biggest things that Michigan struggled with was keeping one personnel on the field at all times. They got all of those 12th men on the field penalties trying to change personnel. They're not going to be able to do that against Ohio State. Ohio State's going to play with an even faster tempo with an even more adept and capable personnel. And Michigan's going to have to keep a base unit on the field that can keep up with that. I think Michigan's defense is better. I think they have a better secondary. I think they have a better pass rush. I think they can move C.J. Stroud from his spots. But I just believe that the personnel that Ohio State has on offense, that amount of firepower, given enough possessions, I think that'll win out.
Okay. Well, Ohio State has been under pressure since week 3. I mean, they've been under pressure because they knew that getting in week 3, if they were to lose another game, their hopes for college football playoff disappeared. And they've come through. They've won. They've won. You know, and they've looked impressive in a lot of games. Uh, I'm looking forward to Saturday's game because normally I'm not that inclined to view this game with any particular team in mind, but I'm looking forward because I think it's going to be a lot better. I was talking to some people at work today, and everybody was telling me, they said Ohio State is either going to blow them out or it's going to be close. And this is from the state of Michigan, and no one said, well, Michigan is going to win. And you know, when a group of athletes feel like it's them against the world, strange things happen. Strange things happen. Okay. Anything else, JJ, about this game that you like to touch on? The Michigan State Ohio State
Um, I would just say it would be nice if Michigan could uh, give Ryan Day his first conference loss. Jim Harbaugh could get his first win over Ohio State as Michigan's coach. I mean, it would be nice. I mean, it would be nice. They definitely need it more than Ohio State's fan base needs it.
What would the win do for Jim Harbaugh?
Give him an extension, I would say.
Give him a big raise?
Sure.
95 million?
I mean, if Michigan wants to find a booster that's willing to pay that, sure. It's
I'm
not
ju-
my money, so I'm not pocket watching. So
I'm just messing with you. But I think a win this Saturday would do more for Jim Harbaugh, for the Michigan fans, than a win would have in previous years. And I think Michigan is capable this year. And I think their fans are going to be loud. The big house can get loud, so we're going there. JJ, I'm going to move on from the Michigan-Ohio State game.
Okay.
And with something else. True or false? One word, true or false, regarding the college football playoff. Only teams from Power 5 conferences need apply. True or false?
False.
Okay, I like that. Now you can tell me why you say false.
Because you gave me a true or false binary.
Okay, I did.
Because Cincinnati is very well positioned. If Alabama loses to Georgia with 2 losses, I think Cincinnati is in a position to go ahead of them. Oklahoma State and Oklahoma could play each other twice and split that series, and then they both have 2 losses. I can see Michigan. If Michigan were to beat Ohio State, that's obviously not the projection. Everyone has Ohio State winning, but I could see Wisconsin upsetting Michigan in the championship game. So there's a lot of avenues for Cincinnati. Cincinnati now does have a pedigree. They've been to BCS bowl games in the past. When they were in the Big East, they went to the Orange Bowl, and they're moving to the Big 12. So I think that they might get the benefit of the doubt that they would be less willing to give a team like UTSA or Coastal Carolina or something like that. They have more of a pedigree and a little bit more brand name. So I think Cincinnati has a path.
Cincinnati has to win over Notre Dame. Notre Dame could win out and be a one-loss team. Ohio State could lose to Wisconsin as well if they were a playoff.
Yeah.
Okay, there's some one-loss teams. Okay, last week, JJ, when we started last week, there were 9 one-loss teams. Now there are 6, and I mean of the major schools, a Power 5. At the end of this week, there will be at most 4, and potentially it could be fewer if there are some upsets, if Notre Dame loses or some strange things like that happen. Conference championship games will reduce the number even lower. The number could potentially reduce the number of one-loss teams even lower. Will or could a 2-loss team make the playoff ahead of an undefeated Cincinnati team?
Exactly one 2-loss team could make the playoff, and that is Alabama. But it would have to take a chaotic 2007-esque season for that to fall in line and happen. But Alabama has they have the history behind them. They have the defending champion status on their.
Sure. They didn't have a
So,
defense. At least they didn't have one last week against Arkansas. JJ, it's almost quitting time here for us to get out of here. But I want to end this with one thing I kind of touched on really quickly when we opened up. The Pac-12. 5 consecutive years without a team in the college football playoffs. That's hard. Why wouldn't the Pac-12 be knocking down the door and demanding a 12-team playoff schedule?
the Pac-12 hasn't been invited for the last 4 playoffs, and this will be 5.
Correct.
So they don't have much of a leg to stand on as it pertains to knocking down the door and demanding.
Well,
anything.
they can join the SEC. Add their voice to it. Just some food for thought. JJ, as we get ready to close, what's the word of the day? What you got to say?
I'm gonna leave that one up for you. What are you gonna close with?
Arkansas double-digit favorite over Missouri on Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. You buy that?
No, I mean, and not just because Missouri beat Florida, which led to the opening of a potentially better job than LSU. I'm still not sure where I stand on that. I just don't think it's easy to, side with a team that's already. Arkansas has already 4 losses. It's hard to make them a double-digit favorite, I would say.
I agree with you, but there are so many more things I would love to talk to you about, JJ. But we can't talk about it forever. But hopefully, the next time we can review the Ohio State Michigan win, and I promise you, JJ, I won't rub it in and say I told you so.
Yeah, I have a feeling it's gonna mirror this exchange when we discuss the Michigan State game. Anyway.
Everybody, thanks for joining us. Peace out. WPS.